Nigel Farage is once again making waves in British politics, but this time it's different. His latest party, Reform UK, has skyrocketed in the polls, overtaking even some of the biggest players and sending shockwaves through Labour and Conservative ranks alike. For years, Farage has been a thorn in the side of every UK Prime Minister, from David Cameron to Rishi Sunak. However, unlike his previous political ventures, such as UKIP and the Brexit Party, this surge appears to be more than just a temporary spike. Reform UK has been polling at an average of nearly 25% since January, a figure that surpasses the highest points achieved by his past parties. Unlike previous short-lived boosts linked to specific events, like the Brexit referendum or Theresa May's downfall, this rise seems to have staying power. The question now is this the beginning of a long-term political shift? The latest polling numbers paint a chaotic picture. For the first time, we are seeing a near three-way split, with Reform UK, Labour, and the Conservatives all hovering around 25%, while the remaining quarter of voters lean towards smaller left-leaning and liberal parties. This unprecedented fragmentation has dramatically increased Reform UK's disruptive influence. Previously, neither UKIP nor the Brexit Party posed a serious local electoral threat in many constituencies. But today's splintered political landscape has created an environment where even minor fluctuations in voter support can lead to seismic shifts in the balance of power. Farage is no longer just an external agitator. He is a direct electoral threat. While Reform UK's rise is a challenge for Labour, for the Conservatives, it's nothing short of an existential crisis. Just months after suffering their worst general election defeat in history, the Tories are still losing ground. According to the latest opinion poll, the Conservatives have lost 1 in 6 of their 2024 voters to Reform UK, and an astonishing 1 in 3 of their 2019 supporters now back Farage's party. For the Conservatives, survival in opposition will hinge on convincing disillusioned voters that they remain the only viable right-wing alternative. But the more Reform UK climbs in the polls, the closer we get to a scenario where Farage himself can flip the narrative, persuading voters that Reform, not the Conservatives, is the real opposition. Although Farage's movement has weakened the Conservatives the most, its overall impact on the UK's electoral landscape is unpredictable. With voters more divided than ever, national polling is becoming an unreliable measure of how first-past-the-post contests will play out. The local political dynamics in each constituency will be key. Labour's landslide victory last year proved that it's not just about how many votes you get, it's about where you get them. If current polling trends hold steady, the traditional parties still have an edge in key regions, making it difficult for Reform UK to convert support into actual parliamentary seats. However, in today's volatile political climate, stability is anything but guaranteed. One critical factor that could reshape the next election is how voters react to changing local conditions. If Conservative and Reform supporters strategically coordinate their votes, Labour and the Liberal Democrats could face serious losses. On the other hand, if the Tories attempt to move further to the right to counter Reform, they risk alienating their more moderate base, pushing undecided voters towards centrist and liberal parties. Labour MPs are already feeling the pressure, particularly those representing the 89 constituencies where Reform UK placed second last year. However, crafting a response to the Farage phenomenon is easier said than done. Some within Labour argue that the party should try to win back Reform voters by engaging on Farage's core issues, particularly immigration. But this approach carries significant risks. Reform UK supporters are deeply disillusioned with the political establishment, and many have little trust in Labour. Attempting to appeal to them by shifting rightward could backfire, alienating Labour's progressive voter base and damaging the party's standing among younger, socially liberal voters. Labour's 2024 victory was built on a broad coalition, focused on unifying themes like economic growth, public services, and the cost of living. Steering the conversation toward divisive topics that play to Farage's strengths could fracture that coalition, weakening Labour's hold on key marginal seats. While a significant portion of Labour supporters have flirted with the idea of voting for Reform UK, an even larger number are now considering parties like the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, or the SNP. If Labour pivots too aggressively to the right in an attempt to outmaneuver Farage, it could trigger a progressive backlash, driving voters toward alternative left-leaning parties. The numbers are telling. While 3 in 10 Labour voters say they would consider switching to Reform UK, over 4 in 10 are contemplating a move to the Lib Dems or the Greens. If Labour alienates this segment of its base, it could lose its grip on key battlegrounds where Reform UK isn't even a major contender. With an election still some time away, all parties are watching and waiting to see how the Farage factor will play out. But one thing is certain: the next election won't look like anything we've seen before. For Labour, the challenge is maintaining unity while resisting the temptation to overcorrect in response to Reform UK's rise. For the Conservatives, it's about survival, figuring out whether to fight Reform UK head-on or embrace elements of its platform. And for Farage, his party is no longer a fringe player. It is now at the center of British politics, capable of reshaping the entire landscape. As the political battlefield becomes more fractured, the stakes have never been higher. Will Reform UK's rise be a momentary disruption, or are we witnessing the birth of a new major force in British politics? The answer to that question may determine the fate of the next government and beyond.